this is what we're working on right now. This is ground way too thin. So this is a slightly tall Nakiri. It's a little bit taller than most of our other ones, or the standard. I'm going to show you how thin this is. If I take my thumbnail and just like put a little bit of pressure, I don't know if you can see it, but like the edge flexes quite a bit. Some edge flex is actually okay. Like we try to get it to flex just a little bit, so then we know that it's thin enough, but there comes a point when I think it's too thin. So why do I think it's too thin? It's when we start putting it on the fixture to hand sand, and then like the tape on the sanding fixture pushes the edge up and down a little bit. So you put it on the fixture, it deforms the edge, you sand it flat, and then once you take it off, it's like completely wiggly wobbly. And that becomes a problem. It's also a problem when this is a finished knife and the customer goes to use it and they chop like a leek or something, and there's like a little piece of grit, it'll wreck that edge. So it's partly ease of finishing, straightforwardness of finishing, and also partly like user confidence and you know, strength for the edge. I wanted to just have this be done and call it done, but like if you look at the cross section right here, it's insane. It's ridiculous. Like when I was thinning this before, I put a little bit too much pressure right here, and it created a low spot. It's just like this whole area will flex, so it's just way too thin in general. So what we're gonna do now, I'm basically gonna sharpen up the edge a little bit. Since this was extra tall to begin with, we have a little bit of leeway to cut it back a little bit, keep a little bit more rigidity in there, and then rethin it, but not as much as before. So we're just basically sharpening it and thickening it up a little bit. I hate to do this on a diamond plate, but that's just where we are. I'm just gonna take it and just sharpen like mainly the front area. The back area I think is just right. Like if I put a little bit of pressure there, it flexes, but it's not like insane. Whereas the front is like, it's like terrifying. It's like foil. So I'm just gonna sharpen mainly this front area. Go a little bit there, flip over, push the burr back to the other side. Do a really quick deburr and then just kind of see like where the strength is at. Look at that, the burr just ripped off. Kind of cool.
I can't get really close. There it is, kind of.
So now I'm just seeing how much it's flexing compared to before. It's a bit better, still really thin, so I think I'm gonna do one more set of passes. And then I feel for the burr, and I'm feeling kind of how strong that burr is. The more metal I take off, the more prominent that burr is going to be. So that just gives me an idea of like how much I'm taking off in a given area. Look at that, the burr just comes off. Okay, and now I'm just doing the flex test again. And that feels a lot better to me, just a little bit. So now the edge is thickened up a little bit there. I didn't really touch back here because that area is pretty good. Now I'm going to re-thin and flatten this bottom section just to make sure that it's pretty good. On these knives, when they get so thin like this, most of our geometry towards the edge is going to be done on stones. We do a lot of it on a disc, but even the disc, when you get to like super thin cross sections like this, like every little tiny ripple on the piece of paper, every little bit of built up glue or grit under it is going to create little gouges. And the stone's going to do a much better job of getting everything a lot cleaner, a lot flatter. So I'm just going to thin kind of like the front section that I just sharpened out. So instead of sharpening at an angle like this, I'm laying it down flat in the bevel. I put pretty much all my pressure right on the edge. So I just want to thin maybe like a 1/4 inch towards the edge. Let's see what not. Actually, we should Sharpie this and see if it'll give you a better indicator. If you've ever watched John Broida's video on thinning, he has big fat Sharpies. I think that's a really good idea. So I'm just going to mark out all along that bevel like that. Go to the other side. And then once this dries, I'm going to do another round of thinning, and this will give me a really good idea on where I'm taking material off. Sam, don't die. I'm using a 320 grit Splash and Go Geshen stone. This 320 cuts pretty quick, but it gives an edge or a surface that's more like, I feel like 600 grit. So it has a nice finish, but it cuts a little bit faster than what you'd normally expect. So that's a nice benefit of this stone. Plus it's Splash and Go, you don't have to stoke it. All right, Sharpie is, I think, dry enough. So I'm just going to do a pass. I'm also being careful not to sharpen my finger too much, because if you take off too much material on your finger pads, you will bleed. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So you can see kind of a little bit of that waviness that I was talking about before. A lot of that is also my muscles just like not applying pressure properly as I'm going through, but it gives you an idea of where to start and then where to focus more on material removal and stuff like that. So actually here and here would actually be a little bit too high. I want to thin a little lower, because if I thin all the way up again, we're going to run into the same problem. It's going to be super thin again. So I really just want to thin kind of like this lower section. So what I'm doing now is just raising it up just a tiny bit more. And since I already took off material, you won't be able to see the difference, but let's try the other side. So lay it super flat, lift up just a tiny bit, apply pressure right at the edge. So by the time we're done thinning stuff here, and again, I'm hitting slightly high, but I think that's okay. A lot of that is just from me rocking about and a little bit of the natural motion that my hands go through. Really what we're looking for is thinning the very bottom section, and then as we sand it and finish it up, it's going to give a slight bit more convexity when it's all done. And then it gives us just a little bit more strength, and that's what we're looking for. Any other tips? Do you have any tips?
No, this is more your expertise.
Now I'm basically going to just evaluate like where I'm taking off metal around here, and then I'm looking at the edge bevel that I just made before when I sharpened it. You can still see, I mean, you can't even see it on the camera, but like you can still see a little bit of the edge. There's a little bit of that edge that I made before, and that's pretty much where I want it. I'm just thinning a tiny bit. I don't want to thin too much.
You can kind of see it.
Oh, okay. So next, I would take this same thing, do the same thing, but now I'd go to a finer grit stone so that we could do less hand sanding. The less hand sanding that we do, the better, because hand sanding is inherently going to give you a lot of those like waves and dips just through the nature of it. So I'm just going to take this, same exact thing as before. Same geometry, same angle, same pressure. We're just getting rid of those 320 grit scratches and going a little bit higher grit. And I was doing a little bit of blending just because it it helps with the convexity and stuff, make sure that I get some of the more coarse scratches higher. This doesn't take off a lot of material, so I'm not too worried about that, but it does make it easier for hand sanding. So what am I looking for? What I'm looking for is that flexibility in the edge without too much flex. And then when I look at it in the light, almost pretty much parallel to a light source, I just want to see that there's no overgrinds, no ripples, nothing too jarring or crazy. So I'm just making sure that it looks even, flat, and straight. The most important area is down here, because that's where you're going to be sharpening and that's where you're going to be thinning down the road. Hopefully you get the idea. So it's more work. These types of knives are always more work in general. It's a lot of fussing about. They're never truly straightforward, especially when you get super thin. Like, things are just going to warp, or it's going to have overgrinds. We always constantly have to make sure that the edge doesn't have like any dips or holes in it. That's super easy to get into, especially even just hand sanding, because you're working with so little metal right here that if you sand too much in one spot, you've ground it away. So these Nakiris and cleavers and lasers in general, you have to keep checking your work. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight in these vegetable knives and thin edges in general. Let me know if you guys have any questions.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.